All right. Any questions? We got another microphone here. If we need to run two microphones. What? We just need to get everybody to sit together. And there are blankets if you're cold. See, once the ABF starts, the AC wins. Before, it's fighting against a full room of people, and then the AC has this victory now. And yeah, the blankets get washed weekly. So I hope you wash them strongly, but really scrub them, but just weekly. Yeah.
In the spring, we wash them in the
I see. Okay, gotcha. Okay. So any questions from this morning? Any thoughts or anything? Ooh, Renee.
It seems like I remember a time in history where it was thought among Christians that acting was wrong. And I actually knew a Christian man in Homer, Alaska, who could not watch TV or movies, he said, because he had a hard time differentiating reality. And he said he just couldn't do it, which I respected a lot. So do you have any comments about
Okay.
acting? And well, and that's originally, I think, why it was considered taboo for Christians or even acting people to be actors.
No. I think it's actually really fascinating question, because storytelling, whatever form you're doing. I mean, a person reading a book is acting out the parts at the basic level, right? You read a story to your kids. Then the bear said, "Oh," you're acting, right? And there's no. That's all you're getting. Sorry, but it is interesting, right? Because theater and story has a way of, in some aspects, bypassing the critical thinking and can appeal directly to the affections. And that is what can be dangerous, because you and I can watch a film or a play where wickedness is being done, and we know it's wickedness, and yet our heart sympathizes with it. Probably the best example I can think of is the Bridges of Madison County. If you've ever seen that. The whole movie is an apologetic for an affair being okay, right? So you get the two kids at the end, and one thinks mom can't believe it. After the mom's dead, it's discovered in one summer she had this fling with Clint Eastwood, a photographer, and while the father was away at the fair, and it's this really sympathetic story. She always wanted to travel the world, but she settled down with this boring, faithful farmer. But she had this one summer, and the whole movie is meant to make you sympathetic to that. And you as a Christian can watch that, can know that's wrong, but your affections can still go to it, and you can sympathize, and you can find yourself praying that she'll meet up with Clint at the end. So, because this is important, because when I talk to people about the things we watch, I can separate what's true and what's right. I can too. My mind knows that's wrong. My heart can still be wooed by, let's make it really simple. I know that, seeing a naked woman on a screen is not right. My heart can still go after it, right? So it's not enough to say, well, I can discern what's going on. The heart's deceitful and wicked. So that's one factor. And if he said he doesn't know it's reality, I'm trying to think what the best thing he might be saying is something like that. My heart gets deceived, and I find myself sympathizing and applauding things that I shouldn't be sympathizing and applauding. So that's the first piece. But then there's all sorts of other issues, like we shouldn't say corrupt things. What if we're doing it in theater? Would you curse Jesus if you were playing a centurion at the foot of the cross for a passion play? Would that be okay? I'm not sure. If, my part was to play a blasphemer, and the director's like, Jeremy, get into it. You can blaspheme better than that. No, so there actually are a fair number of interesting ethical questions. Now, at the end of the day, God has his prophets, Ezekiel most notably, and Zechariah, act out things. And there's story in the Bible. There's stories, and there's the parables, right? So we know that storytelling isn't fundamentally wrong, but it is a really interesting concept, because just as God's word created the universe, a storyteller, now get to literature, creates a world, and what you're looking for when you read the story is to be captivated. And you read Lord of the Rings, and you're in Middle Earth in your mind, right? So there isn't even an issue of reflecting God's glory there that's at work. So all I want to say is I don't have a lot of answers. I think about this stuff. I find it really fascinating, and we need to probably think more critically. some of the pat answers I get, well, I know what's right and I know what's wrong. My heart's really deceptive. And that's why there's some movies you might be able to watch. It doesn't woo your heart to cheer and long for evil, but it might do that to mine. And that's part of the reason why it's not as simple as saying, here are the movies Christians can watch, here are the movies Christians can't watch, and, because what might be a stumbling block for some person might not be for somebody else. I mean, I think there's some clear things we should avoid. We don't want to gaze upon another person's nakedness. That seems to be pretty clear. And then, we certainly want to guard our hearts, and we want to. And then you got to even think through the whole notion of leisure. C.S. Lewis has an essay grappling. The issue Lewis was grappling with is how, with the World War going on, could people be doing trivial things like studying literature and art in college? And he ups the stakes, and he's like, forget the World War. Every day people are going to hell. How can we justify doing anything other than evangelizing? And he says, but I think if we can answer that second question, we can answer the first question. And what he was just talking about is how God, this notion of vocation and the holiness of work and things being done to the glory of God. So then finding a place for leisure, finding a place for rest, I think that'd be the theological category. What are you doing when you're watching a movie? Well, I mean, maybe sometimes you're watching it critically. It's actually work. But most of the time, I think we do it for rest. And there is a biblical category for rest and for refreshment. Okay, those are my off-the-cuff ramblings about art and theater. I don't know if that was going where you're going, but that's the off-the-cuffness. Okay, but it's a fact. It actually is a much deeper topic than I think. There are a lot of interesting questions raised by art and theater, and I don't have a ton of answers. Next question. Dave Kingery in the back.
I like the TV one. I thought that, but do you think that criticism of TV, and I watch some TV. I'm not against it, but even in the 50s, in the family on the Family Channel, where they don't have any cussing or swearing or
Right.
or half nudity and that
Dancing. Sorry.
They have this attitude where this strong hero comes in and saves the day, and everybody
Right.
worships the hero without giving glory to God.
Right.
And I know that secular, they're not going to do that, but the message is clear that you really don't need to give glory to God, and so that's just as destructive, I think, as cussing and swearing.
Oh, more
wouldn't
so.
it be?
I mean, the church generally gets up in arms, and what you hear most of is language and violence. And I'm not saying those aren't important, but I think the real danger is much more subtle and pernicious. Go to Romans 1. Surprise, surprise. Go to Romans 1. I want you to see what the capstone of the capstone of the demonstration of human wickedness is, right? So in Romans 1, the fruit of the tree of seeing God and not wanting to worship him and suppressing that truth and righteousness, Paul gives in a laundry list starting in 28 of chapter 1. Since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to be done. They are filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, ruthless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. So let me ask you, what's worse, doing those things or applauding those things? And every time you and I shell out money to rent a movie, every time you and I, click on a YouTube video, whatever, we're approving of what we see. So now go through that list. And do we enjoy laughing at disobedient children to parents? I think there's plenty of comedies that put that in a very comical light. The child has to either be so over-the-top disrespectful, right? Because most sitcoms, the father is a complete buffoon and a fool, and that's funny. And the smartest person on the show is usually the dog. Most problems get solved that way. And the kids are certainly smarter than the parents. And then we laugh at it because it's done in a clever, witty way. Okay, your heart is applauding. Give me more children disrespectful to their parents. That is wonderful. that just brings a smile to my face. Okay, that's a problem. And that's the subtle thing, is if we train our hearts to delight in things that God hates. Here's this laundry list, and worse than doing them is applauding them. So I would strongly suggest the practice of thinking, what is it I enjoy about this? And I think there can be great answers. When you go from here over to Philippians, about the types of things we should be setting our mind on. The Proverbs say that it's a fool laughs at sin. We shouldn't be laughing at sin. We should be, we want to train our hearts and our affections to respond rightly. So we'll watch things that something like Saving Private Ryan, I think, can have a redemptive value. If the point is to show you how awful war is, it does a good job. You're supposed to respond that way. If you were there, the whole point is supposed to be like, oh my goodness. But we can watch things that if we saw them in real life, our hearts would break and we'd weep. But if it's done in just the right way, we can laugh, we can smile, we can say, that was really neat. And that's, I think, minimally going to be desensitizing us. Philippians 2. So Paul gives us, in Philippians 4, a list of things to be thinking about. Verse 8, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I'd say as you watch TV, watch those things. And so the first question for me is this media or movie portraying evil as evil and good as good? So, yeah, I think something like Saving Private Ryan, you could argue, is showing the horror of war. This is horrific. If they're showing war as something fun and exciting, that's where you got to start asking questions. And no, your point. I remember one of the movies I used to like watching when I was a kid was Pale Rider. I'm going to step on somebody's toes here. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. And he shows up into town and he sets the bad guy straight. And you try to think through it, right? There is something to defending the cause. Someone might lay down his life for another. But there's definitely, at least in my heart, a part of me that says vengeance is Clint Eastwood's. And even though, so it's there are portions of the movie where he's defending other people. There are other portions where Clint Eastwood's going to show you don't mess with Clint Eastwood. And it's kind of hard to fit turning the other cheek and some of the things Jesus said into that. And my heart is getting ready for him to whoop up on him. Because, man, vengeance is Eastwood's. And it's so delicious when he does it. I love a good piece of hickory. And you got to be careful because your heart my heart at least, is going, yes, glory, hallelujah. That's probably not a good thing. And so thinking through, one of the things I try to think through is, well, what is it that I like about this? Sometimes it's just a really cleverly told tale. I love Acorn has, my mom's been watching them, the little Belgian man, Hercule Poirot, and his gray cells. The guy who plays him, David Suchet, is a pretty strong believer. And they are stories of crime, and evil is shown as evil, and good is shown as good, and they're clever, and you try to figure out what's going on. Okay, there's some excellence here. This is witty. But that's its value. It's kind of a distraction and gives my brain a puzzle to solve, but that's not bad. If I'm watching 12 of them a day, that's probably a problem. So I'm not saying you have to find some noble Christian virtue. It can just be like, this is a well-told tale. So Dave, I agree. I think it's much slipperier and much more difficult. In fact, I think comedies tend to be the most difficult. Because here's you ever find this? Someone says something crass, but they say it in a funny way, and it becomes like a catchphrase, and then it pops up in your own head. Oh, that happens to me. Stuff I saw 10, 20 years ago. Some snappy, rude remark come back, some whatever. I won't give any examples. And they stick with you. Because you want to be funny and witty like that, comedies are really difficult to find. I've found, at least in my experience, difficult to find a much redemptive value in comedies because so often what the world's laughing at is wicked, is corrupt, or folly. Like, here's a fool. Let us laugh at him. when the Bible has laughing at fools, it's derision, mockery, and scorn. It's not amusement. So like when the nations rage against God and he laughs at them, he's not like chuckling. He's not like, this is entertaining. You wicked fool. No, there can be absolutely something like a dramatic comeuppance. And you sow the wind, you will reap the whirlwind, and you see that, and there's something satisfying about that. That can have its place. But if the whole notion is, here's a buffoon, laugh. Ha! I don't think that would, anyway. And I'm just giving you my own thoughts on as I'm trying to look at my own heart. I'm not trying to give laws for everybody else. But the heart is deceitful and wicked. And so when you find yourself delighting in something, I think it's a fair question to take a minute and say, what is it I like about this? I mean, you got your list in Philippians, of the it's excellent, it's worthy of praise, it's good. What would I commend as worthy of praise in this? Right? Anyway. Oh, Dave still wants to go. Dave.
Oh, I just, is this on? Okay. This is probably going to be irritating to some people, but I love criticizing Christian movies, even Jesus films, because they contradict Scripture all the time, add stuff.
Okay, hold on.
Like the Ten Commandments, for example. I like watching it, but there's so many contradictions in there. What's that? Well, it's kind of a biblical, movie, but there are so many problems.
Rather than picking on a particular, which I will not do, I will say that by and large, the Christian output of media has not been done very well. Well, usually because they're trying to go for the largest Christian market they can, which tends to be Christian-ish. Right. I'll use one example. The worst example I ever saw, I just laughed the whole way through at how ridiculous it was A Night with the King. It's somebody's favorite movie now. I'm stepping on their toes. But they were so ashamed of the Esther story that they couldn't tell it right. When you join someone's harem, you don't remain a virgin very long. But they have them go on their first date and their kiss, and it's this love story. Like, they have the whole thing backwards. They're just ashamed of the story. Like, they got to make Esther the good girl. They don't realize Esther's not the good guy. Esther is a corrupt woman who has a moment of faithfulness. She's got some admirable character. But the point of the story isn't moralism. Be a good little girl like Esther. Be a good little boy like David. The point of the story is look how God saved his people. And look how this woman, by trusting him in this one area, but anyway, yeah. So normally, what you're shooting at, if your audience is Christian America, you're going to largely make moralistic, therapeutic, theistic stuff where everybody gets what they want at the end. You get the new car, the couple who couldn't have the baby, the person who is sick gets better. The unsaved person eventually comes to faith. Yeah, I haven't been terribly impressed by the Christian outlook. I won't go into any more specific examples, Dave, but yes.
Oh yeah, the latest one. And
no, you're going to go to the very specific one.
I won't say anything for 6 months. I'm so concentrated.
You saved up your chips? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The last one that I forgot what the God movie or something that they talked about the Big Bang Theory was supposed to.
God is not. I'll say something about God is not dead. I think that movie actually does a positive disservice, because in the movie this kid takes on the professor, has a debate with him about Christianity, and in the movie, of course, the professor doesn't have answers to his questions. Let me put it. I'm going to critique it, and then we're going to be done talking about it. You're not going to get a chance to critique it as well. This is my ABF, okay? I can make the rules. I feel like it gives Christians a Nerf gun telling them they've got a real rifle. That if somebody actually went onto a secular campus and tried using most of those arguments, they'd get obliterated. And yet, because in the movie he triumphs, in the movie the professor has nothing to say, people leave the movie thinking, oh, wow, those are powerful arguments, when in reality, no, they weren't. That's my fear with that. So somebody watches that movie is going to try to whip that out on their atheist friend next, and they're going to get demolished. I'd say to some degree it serves a positive disservice. Like, don't present yourself as having powerful arguments when you don't. What? Use some powerful arguments. There you go. Okay. Mike is moving on now, though. Who else wants to? I don't know how we got off on TV and movies. We've got this spicy topic of government and Caesar, and we're talking. That's cool. We can talk whatever you guys want to talk about. I'll scratch your itch. That's okay.
I liked what you said about you watch something and your brain says, no, that's not right, but your heart says yes. And as a Christian, we look at the Bible, we see the facts, which leads to faith, believing, our thinking, and then affections come last. And this kind of goes the other way around. Our affections come. It starts changing the way we think and the way we believe.
Right.
And you were kind of saying that, but it's giving a different spin on it.
Well, if you think of how did the world, and by the world I mean like the evil world system, how did the world come to change our sexual morality so quickly? But not initially by showing these new sexual norms as goods. But we started laughing at them, right? Three's Company, bosom buddies, heterosexual men cross-dressing, pretending so they can live in this thing. But what? Okay, sure. I'm sure there's tons of examples, right? And we know it's wrong, but it's funny and it's well done and it's skillfully told and it's witty. And you get familiar with it. And then you start to sympathize with it. And then that's precisely how it's done. You don't come out with an argument. And it's the winking whole concept. You're winking at it. The whole joke of Three's Company is Jack Ritter is able to live with the women because he pretends to be gay. He's not really gay. He pretends to be. Isn't that ridiculous? Ha ha. And it normalizes. And what we're supposed to, our affections stop responding rightly to sin and evil. And then you come around a generation or two later and you say, hey, if these people are in love, who are you to say anything? And part of your heart, why should? Because, you've already bought into a whole bunch of things. So no, I precisely think that is how a lot of that change happens.
And the other thing is, I was thinking, I don't know if you mentioned postmodernism.
No, but can we?
Where there's no absolute truth. It seems like when you get in a discussion with somebody today, it goes by feelings instead of actual logic. And they use emotional arguments for things instead of... And people, that's kind of the way the world is trained now.
Yeah. No, the postmodern mind, which basically is given up on either there is no absolute truth or absolute truth can't be knowable in most forms. And I'm broadly oversimplifying. So now all that's left is subjective experience. And so basically the mentality is you do what you want with your subjective experience, and I do what I want with my subjective experience. Don't be a jerk and try to interfere with that person's subjective experience. So if that's true for them, if that works for them, good for them, especially if we can't see any immediate victims. So that's the foundational bedrock assumption. Greg wants to add to that.
Actually, I'm not sure I'm adding to that.
Oh.
You talked about how what we watch, what we do, will affect what we think and how we feel about things. I was talking to, I guess, Wendell the other day, and he was talking about how when they select drone pilots and talk to them about, well, now you may very well need to have to bomb these people that are far away. You won't be near them. Can you do that? And most people like you and me will have problems with that. They've found, however, that younger people that grew up on video games are much more willing to say, oh yeah, I can do that.
The disassociation,
and so they what they have done watching video games, where you just shoot people continually, that has affected how they view people.
Right.
I personally think that has added to the rise of school shootings and things like that, but but that's a much larger issue.
Yeah.
But there's no question that what you do or how you are willing to allow yourself to view things is going to affect who you are.
Yes.
How your I guess you called them affections, and I just don't think there's just no doubt about that. Which means we need to be very, very careful what we do because of the damage it's doing to us.
Right. Now, absolutely. And go down to Romans 12. Wherever you set your mind will affect who you become. I used to have a professor who used to say, you're not what you think you are, but what you think you are. And where you put your mind, what you think, so how do we grow in the image of Christ? Romans 12:1, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so garbage in, garbage out. And so if you train yourself to delight in certain things, that's going to shape you. It's going to shape you. If you renew your mind in Scripture, that's going to shape you. It's absolutely inescapable. But where you spend your mental chips is going to have an impact on who you are. And so, again, I'll just get back to the bedrock question. As you're watching something, a good question to ask yourself, or to have a discussion afterwards if you watch something with your kids or your wife or something, is what was commendable about that? If we had to say, why did you watch that? And sometimes the answer, there's nothing. I thought there might be something commendable, and it wasn't. No, this is a soap bubble. It's just, or even though this was bad. But the distinction of what I'm talking about affections is the longings and desires of the heart, right? And this doesn't have to be in a movie. This can be a book. I read, anyone read Ethan Frome when they were in school? Okay. Ethan Frome tells the story of a man who marries a woman who turns out to be a shrew, and she's sick and an invalid, and he has to care for her, and she's not thankful. She just rails upon him. The whole first part of the book, you're just set to pity this guy. And then, I think it's like her cousin or something, some woman enters a picture to help care for her, and the two of them fall in love. And because of when it's written, it can't work out well, but my goodness, you want it to work out for them. Can't there be some way? He's so hard put upon. He's so mistreated by his wife. She's such an awful person. And they can't get together, but really you kind of wish they could. And, of course, it ends in tragedy. They go try to kill themselves together. It's the worst attempt to ever do that I've ever seen, by sledding down a hill into a tree. That's their plan. They get on a sled, toboggan, and they sled down the tree, and instead of dying, they become invalids, and the reverse of the movie is the wife who's being cared for now cares for them, and everyone's miserable. And no, but here's the problem, right? The Christian reads that and says, no, that's okay, because in the end it doesn't work out. That might be the case, but if the entire time your heart was saying, let it work out, let it work out, let it work out, your affections are drifting to approve of and long for what is wicked. Be careful about that. That's the danger. So a Christian could read that and say, well, no, it's okay because in the end, the bad person got what was theirs, and in the end, the adulteress, got caught or whatever. If the whole point of the movie is to make your heart go, yeah, but if you look at it from their perspective, that's not helpful any more than any other topic, would be. So that's what I'm talking about, the drift. Like you might be able to cognitively get, that's not right. They shouldn't do that. But your heart can be like, but I hope they get away with it. And that's the dichotomy you got to watch out for. It's not simply enough cognitively to be able to separate truth from error, right from wrong. We got to guard, Proverbs, right? The heart is the wellspring of life. Guard it. Guard your heart. I have to protect my heart. I don't want this wellspring to get fouled by things outside of it, right? So that's what I'm trying to talk about with that. It's more than simply, do you know what's right and wrong? Like, what is your heart delighting in? Okay. We went for a while. Okay. Who's next? Elsa? Okay. I cannot believe we haven't talked about government yet. That's okay. That's
I
fine.
just want to add to what you just said.
Okay, we're going some more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that comes back to her question as well. You know, we never in the history of the world have people had leisure time like we do.
Right.
I mean, you had to go milk the cows, you know,
The
feed the
Industrial
horses.
Revolution is really what
Yeah,
brought it about.
it's, and I think when you bring up your children, you should teach them to use their leisure time properly. But the television has become a babysitter almost, so that you can do the things you want to do. And people don't spend enough time with their kids, teaching them to read books, good literature. If you think of your older literature, you know, Charles Dickens, that kind of, they still have a regard for God. You know, it is very prominent in those books,
Right.
doing things, you know, worshiping God almost, shall I say. Whereas in the modern literature, there's nothing.
But just because it's classic literature doesn't mean it's safe.
No, but a lot of it is good reading.
Okay.
It
But take the
teaches.
Scarlet Letter. What's the point of the Scarlet
Letter?
Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Scarlet Letter. What's the point of the Scarlet Letter? To sympathize with Esther.
Yeah.
Who's the villain? Her husband. No. He shows up and he really isn't. All my point is, does Esther ever repent, realize what she did was wrong? No, she's proud. It justifies her. The whole point of the book is her justification. Right? That's training people's hearts to look differently at things. And that's classic literature. Oh, no. All I'm saying is just because it's a classic doesn't mean it's safe. That's all I'm saying. Nothing more.
But there's more safe literature.
Okay. It's more
Classic
safe literature in classics.
Then modern stuff is, you know, rubbish. But I'm always thinking of the word you used, amusement. It's against musing, amusing. That's what we do today. We amuse ourselves instead of musing on God's word.
Okay.
And I think that is a problem. We want to be amused. We want to be entertained
Right.
all the time instead of following the Bible, getting hold of good. There are good books. There are good things to read and do instead of wasting your time in front of TV, whether it's sport or whatever.
Just threw that one in there.
Sport.
Okay.
No.
In case you ever
Rubbish.
stepped on everyone's toes, here we go.
They are performing the sport for God's pleasure.
Okay. Well, I think. Let me get us back to Genesis 1. It's fascinating that not only does God tell us what He did, but He tells us how He went about it, and God takes counsel with Himself. I mean, think about this. Getting back to playing Jeopardy with the Bible. Why do we need to know that before God made man, God took counsel with Himself and said, "Let us make man in our image"? Well, at least part of that is because God acts purposely with a plan. And so many of us bounce around with whatever we feel like doing to the next thing we feel like doing. That is definitionally ungodly. It's not like God. And so one of the best rules I heard for TV and stuff was Rick Holland, who used to be the college pastor at Grace, in his family. If anybody in his household wanted to watch something, they had to, ahead of time, say what it was, one reason why they thought it'd be helpful, and when it was going to be over. And the point was to stop the channel surfing. I'm just going to see what's on. Like, no, I'd like to watch this program for this reason, and it's over. Okay, cool. You know, that was how they dealt with it with their kids. But what they were trying to prevent was just the give my mind something to look upon. You know, be purposeful. Not trying to give a law. I thought that sounded like a relatively helpful, or that sounded like there's some wisdom to that. But no, just going back to Philippians, God expects us to put our mind on things, you know, and to be intentional about what we put our mind on in any capacity, whether it's just what you're thinking about throughout the day, whether it's what you're reading on the internet, whether it's what you're watching, what you're reading in a book, whatever. I should be intentional and not purely passive in what I put my mind upon. And we can so condition ourselves, the radio, the advertisements, just to be passive, you know, and we should be active and assertive in what we think about. I mean, and I think even if we just start thinking like that, God will give us wisdom, we'll figure some stuff out. So I think the first thing to realize is just passivity, just letting it wash over you, whatever it is, isn't good. You know? I mean, and even if what your answer is simply, I'm tired, I want to rest, and I'm going to find some rest and some enjoyment in watching this game. That's why I'm doing it. So then you're doing it to the glory of God. I want to be a good steward of, I'm going to find some rest, and I'm going to come back from this reinvigorated. Okay, cool. But you've thought about it, you know. I mean, or another corollary would be, if we're to do all things to the glory of God, that also then means, if the command's given, we could not do all things to the glory of God. So how do you watch a football game to the glory of God? How do you watch a football game not to the glory of God? Because apparently it's possible to do both. So these are all good questions to be thinking. How do you brush your teeth to the glory of God? How do you not brush your teeth to the glory of God? No, these are if Paul says if you eat or drink. So I can go to McDonald's to the glory of God, and I can go to McDonald's not to the glory of God. How does that work? And part of it's going to be, we got to be active, proactive in what we're doing, what we're watching, what we're thinking. And if we're passive, I guarantee you don't accidentally glorify God. Do things to the glory of God. That usually doesn't happen. If you're not being active and thinking about it, I would assume the default is I am not serving God unless I'm actively serving God. I don't think I'm passively doing it that much. So, okay. We have 10 minutes left. Mitchell has a question.
My question comes from the Gospel of Luke.
Oh, excellent. But Bernays, you clearly brought up a topic people are interested in. So, Mitchell.
You talked about the apostles in contradiction of government treating them with respect, the governmental officials. How is Christ treating Herod with respect? And of course, I'm not saying that he's not.
No.
But,
He calls him, go tell that fox.
Right.
Herod's
13.
Herod's a really interesting case. I was talking to Daniel about this. It is entirely possible that Jesus doesn't view Herod as a legitimate authority. He will not talk to him. He completely ignores him when he stands before him. That he may view Herod literally as nobody. I haven't fully fleshed that out, but I know Daniel tends to think that. But if you want to give a better example, John the Baptist, and this is the one I classically hear from people who want to rail against the government. Well, John the Baptist publicly called out Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. To which I want to say, if you think God's raised you up as a prophet, good luck to you. I expect the prophet's fate. I mean, God can raise up prophets to do that. And if that's what you think you're called to, okay. But please don't whine and complain when you get treated like a prophet. Sawn in half. So it's John the Baptist is the best example. He is publicly condemning, rebuking this political figure, Herod. But, he gets beheaded at the end of the story. So, you want. Oh, Kingery wants to weigh in now. Are you?
I have one more
He's
question.
not giving up the mic yet, Dave. He's learned from you. Okay, Mitchell.
Last question. Now, of course, we know that people have their own opinions of Kim Jong-un and our own president, Donald Trump. But and in light of wanting to speak the truth about them, how do we honor them with our speech in light of Titus 3? Be submissive to rulers and authorities, be obedient. And then verse 2, to speak evil of no one. How do we not speak evil of them?
Well, I'd refer you back to back when we were in the Sermon on the Plain, and Jesus talked about judge. We paused and did a whole message on judging and judge not, and a Christian's supposed to judge or not judge. And one of the first things I brought up that I think, because of the day and age we live in, no one ever thinks about is, why ought I render a judgment? Because Facebook's like, what do you think about this Kardashian's new outfit? I hate it. I love, somebody comes up, tell my brother to split the inheritance with me. Who made me a judge over you? How does this fall under my jurisdiction? So part of the first thought is like, why must I have an opinion about Kim Jong-un? Who made me a judge of Kim Jong-un? You know what I mean? That's not a, and this is where I think Facebook and some of social media plays against this, is because all it wants you, tell us what you think. And the more provocative and witty and funny, and if you get a good meme with it, the better. And so the first question is, why ought I have an opinion? You know? And if you ought to have an opinion, if you think there's a good reason to have an opinion, and maybe the answer is simply, I want to teach my kid, hey, Abner, that person's embracing folly, and I want you to see what happens. I mean, that's what the author of Proverbs does, right? My son, come look at me. I saw this man go down by her way, and he was taken into the pits of Sheol. You know, he did not know. He was like a bull led to the slaughter, this guy going to a prostitute. And sure, you might do that. But the first question would be, why on earth ought I, like, what's my judgment about Kim Jong-un going to do? I mean, if you want to ask a simple question, someone says, do you think that was right? Well, now I got a clear standard. I can say, no, I think that was right, or I don't think that was right. That's simple enough, right? Is this policy right, or is that policy right? But like, I think he's a terrible, disgusting, disreputable, like, why is that my business to figure that out? So I find it much easier to work through legislation. I think there's a righteous law and unrighteous law, just law and unjust law. And maybe, some basic things, trying to vote for people who seem to have integrity, trying to vote for people who seem their word seems to matter to them, like, sure. But it's just not who made me a judge over these people? What? Right. Right. So that's but that's what we try to work through in that message on judging and judge not is there any real valid reason? And there might be a real question. A law, somebody does something, people are confused. What do we make of this? I mean, people have asked me why haven't I spoken about some of these topics and stuff? Because I don't think many of us are confused. I don't really I haven't yet sensed in our church much confusion over these. Like, what are we to make of this? So we didn't do a message on the Supreme Court ruling because I didn't think people were like, what do we make? Oh no, I'm confused. No, the people seem to think through it pretty clearly. So what's the point of making a judgment about people out there? If there really is confusion, that's one thing. Sure, okay, now we probably need to speak to it. But, I think we should just even ask that first question. What possible good thing is served by me rendering this verdict? And if you are going to render a verdict, then I'd say try to do it respectfully. So I can look at a policy and say, I don't think that's right. Like for instance, the policies that were just passed in California to ban certain books and stuff. Yeah, as I understand it, that's wicked. It's foolish, and it's going to hurt society. And I think I can say that respectfully without saying those idiots in California passed another stupid. I mean, who made me a judge of them? You know what I mean? I'm not their judge. There's one judge and giver of the law, and when I judge them, according to James, I'm no longer a doer of the law, but a judge of the law. I'm not a judge. So I can look at it and say that's wrong. That's not right. That's going to hurt people. That's going to create suffering. But when I start speaking and people mistake me now for a judge instead of a herald, then I think we're straying into lines, And I know there's room for legitimate righteous anger. You see the suffering, you see what's being done. And so I'm not saying you have to be entirely dispassionate. If you were living in Nazi Germany and seeing the atrocities being done, I would get the emotion and the anger and the anguish. But I still don't think there would be a place for a condescending, stupid Hitler and all of his stupid... No, if you want to have your heart break or say, I am outraged, okay, I can deal with that. But I don't think there's ever a place to have that sort of condescending, looking down your nose at these morons type of thing. I think that when we do that, it smells ugly. The world smells it as ugly. We don't do Christ any favors. We don't do anything to his name. But what we get is to feel superior, and that's the payoff we get. We get to be witty or clever or whatever. And so it's the way I advise this, what we see from Daniel and we see even from Paul and even Jesus' interaction with Rome, when you're going to disagree with your leaders, I'd encourage you to do it like you'd counsel children to disagree with their parents, or a wife to her husband, or whatever. You do it respectfully. It doesn't, just because we think they're wrong, doesn't give us the right to now just sort of, light them up. So that's my two-part answer. First, do I have any business or place rendering a verdict? And if I am going to render a negative verdict, how can I do it in a respectful way? Those would be my two pieces there. So, okay, Kingery's going to close us out. I'm scared now. Get ready to mute the mic, Adam.
Okay.
On my signal. Go, Dave.
Now.
Sorry.
Okay.
Go, Dave. Go.
Did Daniel, David with Saul, and Paul with Felix do about the same thing that John the Baptist and Jesus did with the Herod and
I don't think so. If you look at David's interaction with Saul, David, my Lord, I have not done anything against you. He calls him my Lord. He doesn't call him names. And then David repents from, not only will David not strike down Saul, he is grieved and convicted because he cut off a corner of Saul's garment, which is dishonoring to him. May I not strike down the Lord's anointed? And when he meets the guy who claims to have killed Saul, who didn't, David executes him for daring to lay his hand on the Lord's anointed. And then your example of Paul before Felix.
Oh, I wanted to say, he was, some of the words he said when he confronted Saul, I have not chased you, you're after an innocent man or something like that.
Oh, no, he pleads his case by all means. I am not guilty. I have not done these things. I am not a rebel. I have done nothing but serve you, Saul. I mean, you got to read the tone of voice.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the words I see that's rude or
exactly.
disrespectful in what David says in addressing Saul, as he pleads his case.
Okay. Yeah, and then he said something about, well, my hand will not be against him. Maybe the Lord will strike him down, but my hand is not going to be. And I agree with you. He was respectful, but it was kind of wouldn't you say, a strong statement.
I'd have to look at the text. I don't think we have time right now. We can go there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Save this for next week. No, if you got a text, but without looking at a particular example, there's a couple times David interacts with Saul. I'd have to look at the text. We could talk about the text, a particular text.
And Daniel with Belshazzar said, you knew these things, and yet you did. He was kind of strong. But I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but
when judgment's brought against him, but Daniel is also a prophet.
yes.
And so even as a prophet, but to Belteshazzar, the son, who just had a drunken feast with the golden implements, you knew. But again, we got to read the tone. I could just as easily read it with Belteshazzar, you knew what happened to your father. You knew how God humbled him, and yet you did not listen. And now this has come upon you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what tone of voice he spoke it in. So I think you got to supply it. Because, you could read that same line with, like, told you so, absolutely right into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to break, call it a day. God bless. Thank you.